Hello there, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK. It's been a while since I made a video, so I figured I'd hop back on here and kind of give you guys just an update on the market in general, just a few of the charts that I typically look at to kind of get a bigger picture idea of where we're at. Those of you that have been following my channel for a while know that I recently had a baby. He's about 2.5, maybe little under 3 months old at this point, so he's still kind of at that age where he demands a lot of my attention, me and my wife's, of course. So just haven't had a lot of time to make videos due to that. For those of you out there that have children or have had children, probably understand. But anyway, I did have a little bit of time tonight as the baby's actually taking a nap, something that he usually refuses to do. So I'm going to kind of just, like I said, give you an update on what I see in the market, what I think Bitcoin is in the middle of doing at the moment, where we think it might go in the next, few weeks. And if that does generally sound interesting to you, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. I did also want to quickly apologize for the loud fan running in the background. Hopefully you can still hear me okay and it's not too bothersome. It's hot as Hades here, so, just it is what it is. My little man cave just isn't a very big room. Insulated well, but the heat does like to flourish here, so need a little AC to cool myself down. Otherwise, I'll start sweating in the middle of the video. So anyway, I'm also going to hit you guys with my full intro. I haven't done that in a while. When I first started the channel, I used to always play the full intro that I made. Nowadays, I just play a shortened version. So we'll go ahead and hit you with that and dive into the video. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Gents and ladies, no time to waste. Don't be afraid, it's time to trade. Let's start your brains like high-speed trains. Storm these days like hurricanes. It's time to save this herd this days. Put on your cape and learn the phrase. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. So the first chart we want to check out that we haven't looked at in a while is just the DXY. It's just a chart that represents the strength of the US dollar. Generally speaking, if this is going up on higher time frames, it usually puts a little bit of downward pressure on stocks, especially tech stocks. And the reverse of that is typically true if it's going down. Then tech stocks typically are going up, or at least, generally speaking, it's good for the market as a whole, at least from the tech side of things, if this is going down, and it's not so good if it's going up, right? So one thing we can observe or have observed, if we double click here, look at the indicators, you can see here that price action put in a low here back in late January of this year, and then it also put in another low at the same area, actually a couple different times, basically throughout April. So you had kind of what's referred to as a double bottom, or the beginning of a W pattern. More or less, it bounced twice at the same area. But if you look down here on the indicator, that same swing low, swing high, swing low, actually put in a low. And then this was actually a higher low. So while this was on an upward trajectory, which is the RSI, the Relative Strength Index, price action actually just bounced twice at the same place. This is a form of divergence known as exaggerated bullish divergence. Now, it's not the strongest divergence there is, but generally speaking, if you're seeing a difference between what price action is doing and the RSI, it can kind of give you a clue as to what could be coming next. In this case, because the RSI was actually gaining strength, price action was bouncing from the same area, we've seen this little move from that bottom of that blue range of support, which I talked about in some previous videos. We can see that it's up about 3%. Now, this is the daily time frame. You can see that currently we are retesting bearishly this blue 200 EMA. Now, one thing I want to point out is we haven't really seen it retest since it broke down back here in December of last year. We haven't really seen it bearishly retest the 200 SMA, which is actually the yellow one. It's the one that I think is a little more relevant on most charts. And where would that put, the DXY if over the next, week or two, it does go that up to retest that? You're looking at somewhere between 105 and as high as maybe even 106. I'm going to say more like 105 and a half. And if that's to happen, as we kind of jump over to the Bitcoin chart in a little bit, we can see maybe how the two can kind of work together, although they work oppositely. But my point would be you'll be able to kind of paint a picture as to if this is going to go up, even if Bitcoin doesn't see some catastrophic fall, there will be some downward pressure, and there's a good chance that Bitcoin remains ultimately boring, which we'll talk about here in just a bit. Now, before we move on to the next chart, I did want to point out that the RSI is getting a little bit overheated. It's sitting about 64. You can see it likes to be rejected up at about 75 to 80. It got rejected here around that range, rejected here around that range. Most recently, it actually got rejected at just under 70, so there's a chance, we do see a rejection in its near future. But that being said, there is room for a little bit more of an upside move, at least from the RSI. Now, over here on the stochastic RSI, which is the one just below it, you can also see it's in a little bit of the overheated or the overbought areas, if you want to call it that. I realize this is the DXY, so it's not necessarily something that people are buying, but as far as it's not a stock. But that being said, it does have, there is an idea that soon you might start to see this thing retrace. So the question is, do we get this pump up first to retest this, 200 moving average, which should also be the neckline of this W pattern? A lot of people might be talking about this breaking out at that point and kind of moving on to some new highs. I actually think it'll likely get rejected, at least in the short to mid-term. More likely it goes up, does something like this, tests this, and then maybe even comes back down, back into this blue zone. I think we're going to revisit this blue zone probably a lot of 2023. As Bitcoin kind of ranges, between some prices that we'll talk about here shortly. But I just wanted to let you guys know, keep this on your radar, that the DXY does have some room to the upside. So typically we like to be cautious during these times when this is moving upward. But there should be some opportunities on the horizon. Now, next up, we wanted to just give a quick update on the SPX, which is the S&P 500. This is the chart that I use to kind of track what regular traditional stocks are doing. Typically what I've noticed, or what a lot of traders have noticed, is that if this is going up, then it tends to drag Bitcoin along with it. If it's going down, then it tends to drag Bitcoin down with it. That's not always the case, and actually, as you can see right now, this has actually been working its way up over the past couple of days as we're on the daily chart, and Bitcoin hasn't been doing that so much. However, I still would say it's a good sign that this is actually moving up. In fact, we've been talking about this for months, really almost like 6 to 8 months on the channel. You had this large falling wedge, just kind of update you guys that it was working inside of, basically from the time that it topped in early January of 2022 till it bottomed in October of 22. And so you had this big falling wedge that was working inside of, excuse me, and then it broke out, put in a higher high than the high back inside the wedge. This was kind of our first sign that the trend was trying to change. And then we got our retest, basically, on the dot of the top side of the falling wedge. Most recently, we've been kind of consolidating back below this yellow line of resistance, which actually sits right about 4180. It's a level we've talked about on the channel a few different times, even as recently as one of my last videos from a few weeks ago. And as of right now, or as of the time that the stock market closed earlier today, it's actually trying to push up above that. So does that mean maybe Bitcoin has some sort of a potential, short-term to mid-term upside move still left in it, another leg higher? We'll talk about those levels when we move over to that chart next. But keep in mind that what we want to see here, at least for things to remain bullish for the SPX. Let me just clear things back up real quick. What we really want to see here is a break, a retest, and a hold of this area that we've been talking about at about 41.8. You can see that most recently it was our resistance back here in February of earlier this year. It's also been, in fact, we could probably draw a line on the chart. I don't know why I don't have one. I probably did at one point and deleted it on accident, but you can see it's been support on multiple occasions in the past. It's also been resistance on a few different occasions, especially most recently. So it's not like it's the biggest area in the world or anything, but it's clearly an area that price action on the S&P 500 has reacted to on multiple occasions. So therefore, in this case, it was resistance. We'd like to flip it as support, because just taking the most basic TA in the world, a lot of times if you can flip one area that was previous resistance, turn it to support, well, logically, you would think you're probably going to take one leg higher. It may take weeks to play out, but in that case, you would be pushing up here to this next level, which is kind of a zone. We could use our triangle tool to basically draw a zone up here. I'll leave this here for the next few videos that I make, but more or less it's anywhere from about 43, we'll just call it 4300. Actually, we'll drag that down just a little bit, 4300 on up to like 4350. So if this is able to flip the 4180 as support, there's a good chance over the next few weeks to next month or so we may push higher to retest this resistance up here, likely to get rejected if that happens. But if that happens, that's a pretty good chance chance that Bitcoin, as it's currently consolidating, it would likely drag it higher. And last but not least, and finally, that brings us to the Bitcoin chart. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time going over this, just going to give very, very brief analysis, and we're actually going to follow up on this, God willing, and my baby being, obviously cooperative in a couple of days. Probably on Sunday, I'm going to follow up on kind of a more in-depth TA on Bitcoin. But I just want to give you kind of an update of at least the main things that I'm watching as it relates to at least one specific pattern, what its targets are, and probably the biggest area of interest for me to the downside and the biggest area of interest for me to the upside that I think in either case would be the catalyst to potentially send Bitcoin to my upper and lower target. So again, Sunday we'll dive a little deeper into this, but more or less the areas of interest to me, especially when you're on something like the daily here, you can see that we've spent a long time below this orange box that I've had on the chart for a couple months now. Basically a rejection, another rejection, and then we broke above it with volume. We've talked about this in previous videos, so nothing new there. So to the downside, right now, at least within this range, the key area is really where we're at now, or really close to where we're at now, kind of down around $26,000, but that's what a lot of other YouTubers are probably talking about. For me, it's really always been 25K. I realize that price action seems to be wanting to bounce on this 26 to 27K level, and if we do lose the 26.5 level, then most likely we are going to go down here and retest the 25K. But ultimately that could just be one big retest before we push higher. To me, if we lose 25K, that's the key or critical level, at least in my eyes. It is more of a zone, but we'll just say on a daily chart, if we lose 25K, in my opinion, we're most likely headed back to retest this 200 moving average, which we retested back here on our last big pullback. At that particular time, it was just under 20,000. It'll depend on if and when we do retest this, where it'll be, but at this point, it's closer to 22.5. In fact, it is at 22,511. Good chance if we retest it in the next week or so, it'd probably be closer to 23K. 23K would kind of be the level that I would eye, 22.5 to 23K. To the downside, kind of as an opportunity, a good buy the dip area if we lose 25K, as support. The flip side of this, which right now I'm still leaning towards for a few different reasons, which we'll talk about more on Sunday. But if we are able to if we are able to regain 29K, which to me is, even though we went as high as 31K, to me the current range high is actually closer to 29K. If we break that, there's a good chance that we're going to retest 31K back over here, maybe consolidate a bit below that. Doesn't mean we'll bust right through it, but odds are that we will break through it this time and finally hit that target that I've been talking about for months, which is 32,500. Clearly you can see back here it was an area of interest. So the areas, just to kind of boil it down to watch out for is 29K to the upside. Until that's broken, if we do retest it, good chance that we're going to be rejected unless we break through it. And on the flip side, where we're at now, good chance we're able to consolidate some more, accumulate, and probably push higher. If we lose 25K down here, we're looking at 23K. So 23K, key level to the downside, as what I would call a good buying opportunity if for some reason we lose current support and retest that. If we lose that, that's a whole different story. We're probably going to put in potentially even new lows, but I think 23K, or at least around there, obviously it's not going to be on the dot, but somewhere between 22.5 and 23.5, good buying opportunity to the downside. If you're looking to wait for the breakout, so to speak, I would say 29K on a daily closure would be a good chance we're headed to at least 32.5, and likely, as we'll talk about on Sunday, even higher. I want to thank you guys for stopping by and watching tonight's video. I promise I will make an effort to get more videos out over the coming days and weeks. Just a little bit more consistent, obviously, than I have been, but I appreciate you sticking with me. For those of you that have, hope you're having a good week so far. And as always, if you haven't already on your way out, please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. It's